Welcome to the Stoic Tide. Have you ever wondered what happens the day she realizes she can't control you anymore? The day she senses it, that shift in your energy, the calm in your tone, the silence that doesn't hide pain but power. The moment she finally understands she's lost her influence over you, that's when everything changes. Because control was never about her words. It was about your reactions. She fed off every moment you explained yourself. Every time you argued, every time you tried to make her understand your side. That was her power. Not your weakness, but your emotion. And when that emotion goes quiet, her control disappears with it. At first, she won't believe it. She'll test you. She'll try to trigger you, question you, bait you with silence or jealousy. Anything to get the old version of you back, because the old version was predictable. The old version was reactive. But not anymore. You've learned the art of Stoic discipline, the ability to feel without acting, to care without clinging, to observe without being owned. And that scares her more than anything, because the man who can master himself can never be mastered by anyone else. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And that's exactly what you've become: calm, composed, untouchable. So before we begin, take a breath. Feel that strength inside you, that quiet, grounded awareness that doesn't need validation, doesn't need to prove, doesn't need to react. That's the energy that makes her lose control. And if you're ready to embody that kind of power, the kind that moves without noise, the kind that commands without words, then like this video, subscribe and comment below. I am in control, because today isn't about getting her back. It's about getting yourself back. Now let's begin. Control rarely looks like control. It looks like connection. It sounds like love, concern, or just wanting to talk. But underneath it, it's about power. She never needed to hold you physically. She only needed to hold your mind. The moment she realized your emotions were predictable, she knew how to pull the strings. A delayed reply, a vague comment, a little silence. She didn't have to say much. She just had to create tension, and you did the rest. That's the illusion of control. You weren't controlled by her actions. You were controlled by your reaction to her actions. Epictetus said, "When someone provokes you, remember that it is your opinion which provokes you." And that's the truth most men never see. The real chains are invisible. They're built from your need to explain. Your fear of loss, your hope that she'll finally see your worth. Those emotions keep you in orbit around her, even when you think you've pulled away. But Stoic discipline changes everything. You begin to see the mechanism, the cycle of provocation and reaction, and you step out of it. You start to respond like a man who's been here before, who's seen the game for what it is. You don't get cold, you get clear when she sends the late-night text. You don't overthink. When she posts to test your attention, you don't react. When she withdraws affection, you don't chase. Because the man who controls his emotions controls the entire dynamic. That's when she starts to feel something she's never felt before. Uncertainty. The same uncertainty she once created in you is now her own. She's losing grip on the one thing her ego depended on, your response. And the more disciplined you become, the more powerless she feels. Because she finally realizes the game is over. Not because you walked away, but because you stopped playing. The moment you stop reacting, everything reverses. It's quiet, almost invisible at first, but she feels it. That shift in energy, that lack of response, that unshakable calm that used to crumble under her words. It's not anger. It's not bitterness. It's indifference. And indifference has a gravity of its own. For the first time, she's uncertain. The methods that once worked, the texts, the silence, the subtle manipulation, no longer pull a reaction. You've become unreadable, unpredictable, unbothered, and that terrifies her. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That's the law of the Stoic mind. Stillness is strategy. You no longer speak to prove. You no longer move to be seen. Every decision you make now is filtered through discipline, note motion. And suddenly she's the one overthinking. She replays the moments when she felt certain of your attention. She wonders what changed, what shifted inside you. She feels your absence not as silence, but as power. Because here's the truth. When you stop feeding someone your emotional energy, they begin to starve. And that starvation doesn't come from loneliness. It comes from losing access to influence. She starts to project. You must be talking to someone else. She might even reach out, not to reconnect, but to recalibrate. She wants to know if she still has a hold on you. But when your responses are measured, calm, short, or non-existent, that control evaporates. She starts to realize something she never wanted to admit. She didn't love your peace. She loved your reaction to her chaos. And now that your peace is unshakable, Her ego begins to panic. You've flipped the entire equation without saying a single word. You've become the center of gravity and she's spinning around you. That's the emotional reversal. When the man who once sought approval now stands in silence and the woman who once held control now seeks understanding, there's a moment she never sees coming. The moment her influence stops working. She'll try the same tricks, the same tones, the same silence that used to pull a reaction from you. But this time nothing happens. You don't chase. You don't explain. You don't fight for closure. You've simply outgrown the dynamic. And that realization hits her harder than any argument ever could. You see, control only exists as long as it's believed in. Her power was never real. It was borrowed from your emotional volatility. The moment you stopped reacting, you broke the illusion. The strings she thought she was pulling are now just hanging loose in her hands. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." And that truth cuts through everything. She realizes your peace can't be disturbed because it's no longer tied to her. You don't respond to the bait because you don't need the fish. You don't enter the game because you've already won by refusing to play. And that's when the cracks begin to show. Her posts become louder, but her confidence weaker. Her words become colder, but her silence heavier. She's not trying to punish you anymore. She's trying to reach you, but she can't because the version of you she once controlled no longer exists. That's the real punishment. Not revenge, but evolution. You didn't have to destroy her ego. It's collapsing under its own weight because egos thrive on reaction. They suffocate in stillness. Your silence becomes a mirror showing her exactly what she's lost. A man who no longer bends. A man who no longer seeks. A man who can't be swayed by emotion or validation. That's when she finally understands the power she thought she had over you was never hers to begin with. It was yours all along. And when a man takes that power back, the entire game ends. When a man stops being ruled by emotion, something shifts in the air around him. It's subtle, but it's powerful. The same silence that once felt heavy now feels holy. The same calm that once seemed weak now carries weight, because you've stopped chasing her energy and started mastering your own. This is the rise of the Stoic. You've learned that peace isn't found in withdrawal. It's found in ownership. You own your focus, your reactions, your time. You no longer live at the mercy of someone else's validation. And that discipline, that quiet restraint becomes your greatest weapon. Marcus Aurelius said, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." Your ambition is no longer to be liked. It's to be liberated. You're not proving your value to anyone. You're living in a way that speaks it. Your tone is calm. Your movements are controlled. Your silence has meaning, and she feels it. Even if she pretends not to, she can sense that something sacred has replaced her influence. The emotional access she once had is gone, and now you exist on a different frequency, detached, grounded, centered. She'll try to pull you back, not always out of love, but out of curiosity. Why doesn't he care anymore? What changed? How did he become so composed? But you won't find the answer in your words because you've learned the art of non-explanation. You don't justify your peace. You live it. That's the rise of the Stoic. When your silence stops being defensive and becomes divine. When your self-control becomes your language. When your discipline becomes your presence. You're no longer the man who reacts. You're the man who decides. You're no longer playing for attention. You're building for eternity, and that's what makes you powerful. Not your emotion, but your mastery of it. The man she once thought she could control now controls himself. And that's the one thing no one can ever take. Power doesn't shout. It radiates. It moves quietly through energy, through stillness, through the absence of need. And that's why your new discipline hits differently. She can feel it without a single word. You used to orbit her world, reacting to her moods, her silence, her attention. Now you've become the center of your own, and she feels that gravity. At first, she won't admit it. She'll say she doesn't care that she's moved on. But deep down, there's a shift happening. Her certainty is crumbling. Because when a man becomes emotionally self-sufficient, he becomes magnetic. Not the kind of attraction that's loud or desperate, but the kind that pulls. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man..." Every time she tries to trigger a reaction and gets nothing, every time she tries to provoke your ego and you stay centered, she loses a little more control. And here's the paradox. The more indifferent you become, the more she starts to care. The more you focus on yourself, the more she starts to focus on you because she no longer recognizes the man who once needed her validation. Now you walk differently. You speak slower. You carry yourself like a man who could lose anything and still remain whole. She doesn't understand it yet, but she's feeling the consequences of your composure. Her mind races. Why doesn't he react anymore? Who taught him this peace? Why does he seem freer without me? That's the power shift. When the very energy she wants used to control you starts to chase you, you've become the calm she can't imitate, the peace she can't find, the strength she can't break. And that's what true Stoic discipline creates. Quiet dominance. Not through force, not through ego, but through stillness. You no longer seek to be in control of her. You've become in control of yourself, and in doing so, you've become the one thing she can't manipulate or forget. There's something that happens when Amen becomes truly unmoved. The more you pull your energy inward, the more she begins to move toward it, because the feminine by nature seeks the presence of masculine stability. And when that presence can no longer be manipulated, it becomes magnetic. At first, she resists it. Her pride won't let her admit it, but over time, your discipline begins to work on her like gravity, slow, steady, undeniable. The same stillness she once mocked now fascinates her. The same silence she once used against you now calls to her. She starts to soften, not because she wants control again, but because her ego is losing its grip. She begins to realize that you're no longer playing by emotional rules. You're not fighting, you're not chasing, you're not even proving anything. You simply exist, calm, whole, complete. Marcus Aurelius said, "Be like the rock against which the waves break and it stands firm while the raging of the sea falls still around it." That's who you've become. The movable presence, the calm in the storm. And when the feminine meets that kind of calm, something ancient awakens within her. Respect. She doesn't know why, but she begins to feel drawn to you again. Not to your words, not to your attention, but to your energy. The same energy she once took for granted now feels rare, because it is. Few men can hold that kind of stillness. Fewer can do it without resentment. She starts to remember the version of you she once tried to mold, and she realizes the man who stands before her now is far beyond that. You don't need her to change. You don't need her to understand. You don't even need her to return. You've transcended attachment, and that's what reawakens her femininity. Your lack of need creates space. Your restraint creates contrast. Your peace creates desire. And for the first time, she's not trying to control you. She's trying to understand you. Because what she's seeing now is a man in total command of himself. That's the return of the feminine. When her pride fades and her respect begins. There comes a point in every man's evolution when he becomes untouchable. Not because he hides, but because he's found peace so deep no one's chaos can enter it. That's where you are now. You've become what few men ever reach. A man who needs nothing yet commands everything. Your stillness no longer comes from self-defense. It comes from understanding. You don't avoid her energy because you're afraid of it. You transcend it because you've outgrown it. She can sense it. She can feel the change in the air when your name comes up. She used to feel power when she thought of you. Now she feels pressure because your silence no longer carries emotion. It carries presence. Marcus Aurelius said, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say or think or do, only what you do." And that's the level you've reached. You've become so inwardly complete that outside validation feels like noise. You no longer respond to temptation, to guilt, or to manipulation. Not because you're numb, but because you're free. That freedom is what makes you unreachable. You've risen from the emotional battlefield. You've seen every weapon thrown at your peace. And you've realized that nothing external has the power to wound what's internal. She might still test the waters. A message, a memory, a subtle attempt to re-enter your mind, but it no longer lands. The man she once controlled is gone. And what stands in his place is something she can't define. You've become a paradox. Close enough to remember, distant enough to revere. Your silence is sacred now. Your indifference isn't cold, it's divine. And that realization breaks her ego more than any revenge ever could. Because how do you manipulate a man who has mastered detachment? How do you control a man who has learned self-command? You don't. You admire him from afar and call it mystery. You've become that mystery. The man who can't be provoked, can't be predicted, can't be possessed. That's the unreachable man. The final stage of discipline. When peace is no longer a state you visit, but the kingdom you rule, there comes a point where peace stops being a practice and becomes your nature. You no longer wake up thinking about what she's doing, who she's with, or whether she remembers you, because none of it holds weight anymore. You've detached not just from her, but from everything that once ruled you. This is the Stoic ascension. You've arisen above validation, above reaction, above emotional turbulence. You don't need to prove that you've healed. Your stillness says everything. You don't need to show that you've changed. Your energy speaks louder than words. You've reached the level the Stoics spoke of, a man governed by reason, unmoved by outcome, and guided by virtue. You've become a living embodiment of balance, strong but calm, silent but intense, peaceful but powerful. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one, and that's what you've become. You no longer preach peace, you are peace. You no longer chase discipline. You embody it. You no longer speak about control. You radiate it. The same emotions that once threw you off center now move around you like wind around a mountain. They touch you, but they don't move you. You've learned the difference between attachment and connection, between silence and suppression, between ego and essence. And that's why you stand different now. Not harder, but lighter. Your energy doesn't pull, it attracts. Your words don't demand, they guide. Your silence doesn't isolate, it commands respect. That's the Stoic ascension. When the man she once tried to control becomes the man she now studies in silence. Not because he's loud, but because he's rare. Not because he's perfect, but because he's present. You've transcended the noise. You've become stillness in motion, the quiet storm every soul can feel but no one can shake. That's the final transformation. The man who once lost himself in emotion now rules himself through discipline. In the end, she didn't lose control because you punished her. She lost control because you found peace. You stopped reacting. You stopped explaining. You stopped fighting battles that no longer existed. And that's when she realized her power was never over you. It was over the man you used to be. But that man no longer lives here. You've become something different now, something rare. A man who moves through chaos with calm. A man who feels deeply yet acts deliberately. A man who knows that strength isn't in resistance but restraint. That's Stoic discipline, the quiet authority that doesn't need to prove, argue, or perform. The kind of strength that can love without attachment, walk away without hate, and stay silent without fear. Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And your thoughts are no longer chained to her approval. They're focused on growth, purpose, and mastery. You've taken your energy, the same energy that once reacted, and turned it into fuel for your evolution. She'll remember you not as the man she controlled, but as the one who became untouchable, because true power doesn't announce itself. It sits in silence and the world adjusts to it. So breathe. You've made it through the noise. You've mastered the only thing worth mastering, yourself. And if you live by that code, if you move with calm, act with purpose, and lead with silence, then like this video, subscribe, and comment below. I'm in control. Thanks for watching the Stoic Tide.